A tiny kitten was found sleeping on a bear. The truth will melt your heart. The forest was unusually quiet that morning. Dew clung to every leaf, and a pale mist rolled lazily through the pines. The crunch of boots against damp soil was the only sound that broke the stillness as Daniel, a local hiker, made his way deeper into the woods. He had walked this trail countless times before, but something about this morning felt different, charged, as though the forest held a secret waiting to be uncovered. As he rounded a bend near a moss-covered clearing, Daniel froze. At first, he thought his eyes were deceiving him. Just a few feet ahead, in a soft bed of grass, lay a massive brown bear, its chest rising and falling with a heavy rhythm of sleep. Daniel's breath caught in his throat, instinct screaming at him to back away slowly. But then, he saw it. Nestled against the bear's thick fur, as if it were the safest place in the world, was a tiny, fragile kitten. Its body was curled in a perfect circle, its head resting on the bear's massive paw. The kitten's ears twitched slightly as it dreamed, utterly unafraid of the predator it used as a pillow. Daniel blinked, unable to comprehend the sight. His heart pounded, partly from fear, partly from awe. Bears were dangerous, unpredictable creatures. And yet here, before his very eyes, was a scene so tender, so impossible, it almost seemed pulled from a storybook. He crouched low, careful not to make a sound, and reached for the small camera slung around his neck. But even as he lifted it, he hesitated. A thought whispered inside him, this moment isn't meant to be captured. It's meant to be felt. The kitten stirred, stretching one tiny paw across the bear's fur before settling again. The bear shifted slightly, but instead of waking with aggression, it adjusted its massive body to shield the kitten more fully from the cold morning air. It was a gesture unmistakable in its meaning, protection. Daniel's throat tightened. He had expected to witness the raw, merciless laws of the wild. Instead, he was staring at something profoundly different, gentleness where there should have been danger, love where there should have been fear. For the first time in his life, Daniel realized the forest still held mysteries humans could never fully understand. And he knew deep down that this was only the beginning of a story far bigger than himself. Long before Daniel stumbled upon that breathtaking sight in the forest, the little kitten's story had already begun, one marked by loss, struggle, and an instinctive fight for survival. The kitten had been born on the edge of a small farming village, its litter tucked safely beneath an old barn. But fate, as it often does, had other plans. A heavy storm swept through the region, tearing roofs from houses and flooding the lowlands. The barn, fragile and weather-worn, collapsed under the weight of the rain-soaked wood. When morning came, the villagers found ruin, and scattered within it, a litter of kittens. Most had been taken by the flood. Only one had survived. So small, its eyes barely open, the kitten crawled from the wreckage, mewling into the silence. For days it wandered, searching for warmth, its frail body shivering in the cold nights. Hunger clawed at its belly. The forest loomed, dark and merciless, yet it was the only refuge the little creature could find. Foxes skulked in the shadows. Hawks circled above. At any moment, the kitten could have been swallowed by the unforgiving jaws of the wild. And yet, there was something about this tiny survivor, a spark, a will that defied its size. Though fragile, it pressed onward, guided by instincts it didn't yet understand. Nights were the hardest. Alone with nothing but the moon above and the rustle of unseen predators around, the kitten curled into the crook of tree roots, trembling until dawn. More than once, its faint cries echoed into the emptiness, cries that no mother would answer. Until the night it stumbled into a clearing, and found warmth unlike any it had known before. The bear was resting then, its massive body stretched across the mossy ground. To the kitten, exhausted and desperate, it wasn't a predator. It was warmth. Shelter. Safety. At first, the kitten crept forward cautiously, its paws silent against the grass. But when the great beast didn't stir, it dared closer. Then closer still. Finally, with a weary sigh, the kitten pressed itself against the bear's thick fur, the heat radiating into its tiny frame. The bear shifted, grumbled low in its throat, and for a heartbeat the kitten froze. But instead of casting it away, the bear let out a heavy exhale and settled again. The kitten, too weak to question the miracle, closed its eyes and fell into the deepest sleep it had known since the barn fell. By morning, a bond had been written in silence, the kind that didn't ask for permission, but grew simply because two souls needed each other to survive. When dawn broke through the forest canopy, shafts of golden light spilled across the clearing. The mist lifted, Birds began their morning songs, and the bear stirred awake. Its massive body shifted, muscles rippling beneath thick fur as it released a low guttural yawn. That was when the bear noticed it. The tiny ball of fur nestled against its paw. For a long moment, the beast simply watched. Its deep brown eyes, often feared by hunters and travelers, softened with something more curious than anger. The kitten, sensing the shift but not yet awake, stretched lazily, one paw patting at the air before collapsing again in sleep. The bear tilted its great head, sniffing at the fragile creature. To the wild, the kitten was nothing, prey so small it could vanish in a single bite. Yet the bear did not open its jaws. Instead, it lowered its head beside the kitten, exhaling a warm breath that ruffled the kitten's fur. The kitten blinked awake, blinking up at the giant. For the briefest moment, silence held the forest, predator and prey, locked in a gaze that should never have been. But what came next defied everything nature dictated. The kitten did not run. The bear did not strike. Instead, the kitten let out a tiny questioning mew and pressed its head against the bear's paw as though it belonged there all along. And the bear, the great untamed ruler of the forest, rumbled with a sound so low, so strange, it could almost be mistaken for a purr. Days turned into a rhythm. The kitten followed the bear's lumbering steps, its little paws darting quickly to keep up. When the bear searched for berries or fish in the river, the kitten would wait patiently at the shore, mewing proudly whenever the bear returned with a catch. At night, the kitten curled against the bear's side, wrapped in warmth and safety that no storm, no predator could penetrate. For the first time since its birth, the kitten wasn't just surviving. It was living. The forest began to whisper of the strange pair. Deer, foxes, and owls watched with wide eyes as the unlikely companions passed through. The kitten's small figure became a shadow at the bear's side, the two moving together as though they had always belonged. It was a bond written not in words, but in trust, the kind of trust the world rarely sees, the kind that changes everything it touches. And Daniel, the hiker who had stumbled upon them, couldn't shake the image from his mind. He knew what he had seen was no accident. Something extraordinary was unfolding in those woods, and he felt destiny pulling him back to witness more. News travels fast in small towns, especially when it's strange enough to sound like a legend. Daniel hadn't meant to start rumors. After all, who would believe him if he said he'd seen a bear curled up with a kitten in the middle of the forest? Yet the image haunted him, and one evening, over a drink at the village tavern, the words slipped out. At first, the men laughed. A kitten? Sleeping on a bear? One scoffed, nearly spilling his beer. You've had too much, Daniel, another chuckled. But Daniel's eyes were steady. I saw it. With my own eyes. They weren't fighting. They were together. Like family. The laughter faded into unease. The idea was ridiculous, impossible, and yet Daniel was not a man known for lies. The story spread. From the tavern to the baker's wife, to the children at play in the square, until the entire village whispered of it. Some found it enchanting. Maybe the forest is kinder than we think, said the old schoolteacher with a wistful smile. Others felt only fear. A bear that doesn't act like a bear is dangerous, muttered the blacksmith. Unnatural. Mark my words, it'll end in blood. Soon, curiosity pulled villagers into the woods. Hunters crept along familiar paths, rifles slung over their shoulders, eyes sharp for any sign of the bear. Mothers clutched their children closer, warning them not to wander near the tree-line. The forest itself seemed to buzz with tension, as though it too felt the weight of watching eyes. Meanwhile, the bear and the kitten went on with their days, unaware of the storm building beyond the trees. The kitten grew bolder, batting at butterflies, chasing falling leaves, while the bear watched like a patient guardian. They had no understanding of the whispers, no knowledge of the fear or fascination they stirred. To them, the world was simple: warmth, trust, companionship. But Daniel knew better. He saw the way the hunters spoke in low voices, the way their fingers lingered near their triggers. He saw the suspicion growing like wildfire. One evening, as the sun bled red over the horizon, Daniel made a decision. If no one else would protect the bond between that tiny kitten and the gentle giant, then he would. Because deep down, he believed the truth. Some things are too rare, too beautiful, to be destroyed by fear. What he didn't know was that fate was already moving, drawing the kitten and the bear closer to a moment that would test their bond, and the hearts of all who watched. The summer had been dry, far too dry. Leaves crackled underfoot, the river's song was weaker than usual, and the forest seemed to hold its breath under a sky that refused to rain. Everyone in the village knew the danger. But no one knew how quickly it would come. It began with smoke. A faint trail curling above the trees, unnoticed at first. Then, a spark, careless, unseen. By nightfall, the forest roared with fire. The blaze spread like a living beast, devouring bark, licking branches with tongues of flame, painting the horizon in furious orange. Animals scattered in terror, deer leaping through undergrowth, foxes darting through the brush, owls abandoning their nests mid-flight. And in the heart of it all, the bear and the kitten. The bear's deep growl echoed as it shielded the tiny creature with its body, swatting falling embers aside. The kitten clung to its fur, eyes wide with terror, mewling helplessly as smoke thickened around them. For the first time, the gentle giants seemed unsure. Where could they run? Which path was safe when the whole world burned? Daniel saw the glow from the village. He grabbed a lantern, a wet cloth, and without hesitation, plunged into the forest. The villagers shouted warnings, some calling him mad, but Daniel didn't care. He knew who was trapped in those flames. Branches snapped, sparks rained down, the air turned into a furnace. Through the smoke he glimpsed it, the massive silhouette of the bear, standing firm while the kitten shivered at its feet. For a heartbeat, man and beast locked eyes again. Not in fear. Not in challenge. But in recognition. They both wanted the same thing, to save the fragile life trembling between them. Come on. Daniel shouted, coughing, waving his arms. He pointed toward a gap in the fire where the trees had not yet caught. The bear hesitated, then with a thundering step, it moved. The kitten still clinging, it followed Daniel's desperate lead through the inferno. The journey was chaos. Trees crashed behind them, sparks lit Daniel's clothes, the kitten squeaked in fright. The bear bellowed, shoving aside burning branches, clearing the way where Daniel's small human strength would have failed. Together, man, beast, and the tiniest of lives, they carved a path out of the fire. At last, bursting through the treeline, they emerged into the cool night air. The villagers stood frozen, watching with wide eyes as the impossible sight unfolded. Daniel stumbling out, coughing and blackened with soot, and behind him a massive bear, cradling a trembling kitten in the shadow of its bulk. The whispers died that night. No one laughed, no one scoffed. They had seen the truth with their own eyes. A bond stronger than fire itself. The flames would leave scars on the forest, blackened stumps where life once thrived. But in that darkness, something brighter had been proven. Trust. Loyalty. Love, in its most unexpected form. And though the fire ended, the story was far from over. 4 years later, when the world had nearly forgotten, the bond would return in a way no one could have imagined. Time has a way of softening memories. The fire became a story the villagers told in hushed voices, half in awe, half in disbelief. Children grew up hearing about the night Daniel walked with a bear out of the flames, carrying a kitten that should never have survived. The kitten did survive, of course, and more than that, it thrived. Daniel raised it in his home, the fragile little creature becoming a lively companion. But the bear disappeared back into the forest. Some said it had died. Others claimed they'd seen its shadow on moonlit nights, watching from the treeline. Daniel never knew for sure. Yet in his heart, he carried the memory of that gaze, that moment of unspoken trust forged in fire. Years passed. Daniel grew older. His once strong hands trembled now, his walks into the forest shorter each season. The kitten, no longer tiny, had become a sleek cat that rarely left his side, curling at his feet by the fire each evening. Life was quiet, steady, until the night the world fell apart again. A terrible storm struck. Fierce winds battered the village, and rain came in floods that turned roads to rivers. In the chaos, Daniel, frail and stumbling, slipped outside while trying to secure his shutters. A branch snapped from above, striking him down. Alone, injured and half-conscious, he lay in the mud as the storm raged on. But he was not alone for long. From the edge of the forest came a shape, massive and unmistakable even through the sheets of rain. A bear. Not just any bear, the bear. Older now, scarred by time, yet still towering, powerful. And as it lumbered closer, there was no anger, no threat. Only recognition. The cat hissed at first, circling Daniel protectively. But the bear lowered its head, nudging the old man gently, as though reminding him of a promise never broken. With surprising care, It shifted its great body beside him, shielding him from the storm, keeping him warm as the night tore around them. When dawn came, villagers found the sight that would become legend. Daniel, weak but alive, leaning against the side of a massive bear, his cat nestled in his lap, safe and dry. The beast stood watch until help arrived, and then, as silently as it had come, it turned back into the forest, leaving only paw prints in the mud. Daniel's voice trembled when he spoke afterward. "It remembered," he whispered. "After all these years, it remembered." And so the story lived on. Not just of a kitten and a bear, not just of fire and survival, but of something greater, a bond that defied fear, outlived time, and returned when it was needed most. Because some bonds are never broken. Not by fire. Not by years. Not even by the wild itself.